Hello, class. Today I am reviewing Chapter 5, your chapter on interviewing. Now, even though there are lots of different types of interviews you will either perform or be involved in some way, interviews in general have two basic purposes. You are filling in gaps of information or adding a face to the facts. So, whenever you're going to a job interview, it's usually because they've already looked at your resume. They have a little bit of an idea about you, but they want to fill in some gaps in their information and figure out what kind of personality you have. Now, whenever it comes to news writing, what you're doing is you are personalizing a story. You are adding a human interaction, human interest for people. Now, this can also mean that during your interview, you start to get a sense about the person, realize maybe there's more to the story than what you saw on paper. There are different types of interviews. As we said, there are everyday questions, parents, instructor. Anytime you go and have a dialogue with someone, when you talk to somebody, you are asking them questions and you are having a type of interaction with them. You also, of course, have job interviews at different points in your life. You have university interviews too. Whenever you talk to your coworkers or your supervisor, or even if you're talking to clients as an advertiser or a public relations person, you need to get a sense from them. What do they want, or what, and how does that relate to what you think they need? So again, looking for a certain amount of information here in order to decide what to do later. Now, during the pre-interview preparation process, you're going to review written information sources. You're going to look for more information about the topic at hand, whether it's a person or a place or an event. And most of the time, you'll be able to find it in local, national, international news. A lot of their archives will have information if it's an event that's happened before or relates to something that happened in the past in a town or in a country. You may also find information in periodicals or journals, or, of course, at your library if you need to know more about a certain indigenous group or you need more books on a topic, like if you're trying to write a piece about a pharmaceutical company and you need to know more about the drugs that they're making before you go into your interview. Government websites have both local and national ones, well, local, state, and national. Look for the .gov.edu. Some of them have purchase.com. LPSS is one example. They also have a lot of government agencies also have social media as well. Sometimes whenever there's breaking news related to a government organization, they might actually post it on social media first or on their website before they start sending out official press releases. Written information, again, can be social media. You can even do blanket internet searches, use different search engines, not just Google. Sometimes you'll end up with different answers and find certain items popping up first, depending on what type of search engine you use. As always, use caution when using the internet as a source. Backup findings with credible sources of information. Look for field experts and eyewitnesses to whenever you're looking for people to interview about a topic. And also, of course, you want to corroborate the information you're finding on one source online with another more trusted source before you bring it up in an interview. Review publication dates. Sometimes you'll even have studies where someone will say, oh, we found X, Y, and Z, and then you'll go back and see a peer review of that study disproved whatever the original one said. So again, depending on whatever your topic is, you need to make sure you are using the most recent and relevant information. And also, of course, make sure that you have relevant information for your topic, and do your best to have first or second level sources. If you're using a third level source, look at their list of references. If they don't have a list of references, you probably shouldn't trust them, and go back to their sources to figure out whether or not this is information you can use in your story. All right. So before you go in to interview anyone, you want to have your facts straight, your story straight, figure out what is going to be your story. Write an outline, find a lead or focus, and ask yourself, as we discussed before, what makes this story newsworthy? Look for your foci. Answer your 5 W's and your H as much as you can before you go for the interview. And that way you'll have better information for your interview questions. You'll be able to ask the important questions instead of just asking blanket, empty, open-ended questions. You can ask specific open-ended questions and close-ended questions. Now, of course, organize your information based on the lead and ask yourself what's missing. What do you need from this person you're going to interview? How many interviews do you need? Do you need more than one person in order for your story to make sense? Interview sources based on what they can add to your story. This is not just someone repeating what you found on another website or something. They should be adding additional information that is relevant to the story, relevant to your audience. You want to make your story more interesting by including these people. Now, finding an interview, again, what can they add to your story? We're looking for meaningful levels of involvement here. This means first-person accounts. Whenever you look at a TV broadcast or read a news article about a fire, for example, they are always talking to an official with the fire department in order to get an understanding of how they think the fire started, and also any evidence that might lead to them answering that question. How did the fire start? Who was involved? You also will see them interviewing people who may have been living there. They may have been in the building whenever something caught on fire. You're looking to develop that personal connection between your facts and your audience. They're able to understand a lot better what happened if they have a face to put with it. Whenever you read the COVID outbreak stories online, you'll see they always have at least one person who is affected, either people who are in the hospital with the coronavirus, or they have people who have loved ones who were involved in some way, or they're interviewing nurses and doctors to find out how they're doing in relation to the story. And you always want to have at least one authority on a subject as well, and a person of interest, or even a person on the street. So with a person of interest, you're getting someone who has that fame element to add to your story. Person on the street, this is a stand-in for your audience most of the time. They're people who can ask questions or provide opinion quotes about something, or other information that, even though they weren't directly involved necessarily with whatever story you're relating. Now, whenever you go in for your interview, keep these points in mind. You want to have them say and spell their first and last name. This will help you and help them So that way we don't have any misprints, any issues with the interview where you start calling them the wrong name, possibly. You want to get your interviewee's official title and the name of their business or whatever event, as long as it's applicable to your story, which it should be because you're interviewing them. And make sure you have a way to contact these people. You need to have a phone number, an email, some way for you to get in touch with them in case you need to do a follow-up after your interview is finished. Now, when you're asking questions, make sure they reflect the main topic of your story. Include the relationship between the topic and the interviewee. Again, like we said with the COVID example, you're making sure that the person you're interviewing doesn't just have an opinion on it, they actually have an involvement in it in some way. Most of your interviews you should be able to draw a logical connection between the person you're interviewing and the topic at hand. And ask a series of open-ended and close-ended questions. You want to develop a flow for your questions, just like you do a flow for your writing. Some of your questions, you're asking them to double check facts. Other times you're asking them because you need more information or you want to get that really nice sounding quote for your article where you can directly quote them. So open-ended questions are ones where you're asking for extended answers from your source. These a lot of times add emotion and context for the dry statistics you're including. For example, how did this near-death experience impact your life? That would be an open-ended question where they should be able to give you a little more context for how whatever event impacted them. Now, you also want to ask some close-ended questions. This will help you clarify facts and gather any additional specific information that you'll probably paraphrase later on in your writing. For example, were you here when the fire started? Well, if it's someone who started a fire, they probably aren't going to tell you, but that's an example of a closed yes or no question. You also want to include some silence in your interviews, not just so you have silence. It's more like let the interview breathe. You don't need to fill every void in or lull in conversation with additional words. You're allowed to have some silence, to have that breathing room in there in order to let your interviewee think about a question or just to kind of have natural space in there. Most of the time you want them to be speaking, not for you to be the one talking. Now, whenever you're going into an interview, you want at least 5 or 6 questions based on your research. This really depends on what topic you're discussing. If you are doing a feature story on someone who is retiring from their job after 30 years, you would probably have more than 5 or 6 questions. Again, depends on your medium, on how you want to present your information later. Make sure you have a logical flow to your ideas, but allow for the possibility that you might need to adjust your questioning. Sometimes you'll need to rephrase your interviewee's answers in the form of a question in order to get a little more information out of them. So if they say something that sounds a little weird, you don't necessarily have to do it right after they say it, but jot down some notes as you're interviewing and see if anything sticks out to you. And you can always review your notes and revisit those those points in case it's something that is actually important for your writing later on. And again, after you ask your open and close-ended questions, ask them if there are any other points they want to make. If there's something possibly you overlooked, ask them. You can also ask for other sources. Maybe they know some people that you may not have heard of or considered. Now, this also depends on who you're interviewing. Some politicians or other officials can be a bit condescending, and they won't appreciate you asking them like who else you should interview. They might, be kind of a jerk about it. So again, depends on your sources. And whatever happens whenever you're talking to someone, always be polite and professional. You don't want to tell someone to go F themselves, basically, and ensure that they speak more than you. Your goal is for them to answer your questions, not for you to answer theirs. So that's a pretty big point right there. You want them to be the ones speaking for the majority of the interview because you are interviewing them, not the other way around. Now, when you're recording an interview, the book mentions 1- and 2-party consent. So Louisiana is a 1-party consent state. And what this means is whenever you go in to interview anyone, whether it's over the phone or if you're doing an in-person interview and you have a recorder with you, technically you are allowed to record it. As far as things go, if you're a practicing journalist, if they start out from the beginning by saying, I don't want you to make a recording, then yeah, usually you should respect their request. You want to, but in general, you usually shouldn't have a problem recording conversations. You want to build trust by disclosing that you are going to record. Now, there is a legal exclusion for voyeurism. However, that should not be anything you're involved in. That's more like people going into the changing room and like videoing people or videoing into someone's house without their consent. That's a totally different animal. But if you want to see the specific law, I have the link right there. And again, if you can, you do want to have some kind of recording. This will offer additional multimedia capabilities. Most journalists and reporters now are considered multimedia journalists. So they need to be able to have still photos, video, audio recordings, everything in order to post online or for podcasts or for whatever television studio where they work, in addition to their social media accounts. Now, where should you interview someone? While it isn't the worst idea to have to interview someone at a coffee shop, it also isn't a great choice. Most of the time when you go to a public place, you can't anticipate how noisy it'll be, or maybe you'll have trouble recording or something, and it might end up just being really awkward for both of you. The best way to do it is to go to your source, go to their home or office if this is a planned interview. It will be a lot more comfortable for them. And if they're more comfortable, then that means they're more willing to talk. They may also have some props in their office that are available because you went there. For example, I interviewed some people for a story about the city buses back when they first changed them to natural gas instead of just diesel. And whenever I went to this person's office, he was able to show me some videos. They had safety videos showing why these natural gas buses were so much safer than diesel, and just had a lot more figures and everything at hand. The other location would be if you're going to a scene of breaking news. This would mean crashes or a fire or a shooting or something like that. Usually those you really don't have as much time to prep before your interview. You're looking at a very short list of information, but for those types of stories, most of the time you'll have kind of a preset list of people to look for at the scene. And also you'll be able to follow up in another location, or another person working with you on the story will be able to follow up and give you additional information later on. Now, you can also do video recording, and you could do video recording in person, but most of you would probably want to do Zoom or another video chat at this specific point in time. It's a lot easier. People can stay in their homes and everything. The only negative with doing video chat recordings, of course, is if you lose your internet connection. Also, if you have trouble with you have a little more trouble reading body language, even though you can technically see someone, it can be difficult to understand exactly what it is they're saying, or get a feel for their body language, because they're too focused on either reading something themselves or finding their camera lens wherever it is around their stuff. You can also record phone calls. That is definitely an okay thing to do for interviews if either meeting them or doing a video chat are not available to you. Email is also an option. Emails, I find a lot of people are a little too quick to email or text instead of going with the phone or video recording. You really do get a lot more out of it whenever you have video recordings. And you can always follow up a phone or video recording with an email or text if you need a little more information about something, not necessarily a quote, but just general context. Emails can also be great if you need them to send you specific information, if they need to send you PDFs of documents, linked photos, or any other information relevant to your story. Now, you've gone through your list of information and you already made your pre-interview outline. We went in, we made some questions and did the interview. Now, how do you take the interview information and add it back in so you can write a coherent story? First, start with your outline, review your lead question and the answers your interviewee gave you. Do you still want to continue with the same lead you created before the interview? Sometimes it will change, but most of the time, especially for traditional news writing, you're probably going to leave the same one. But again, compare what your interview gave you with what you started with and figure out whether or not you need to change a few things around. Okay, you changed everything or didn't based on what you saw in your interview. Add relevant additional information you received from your interviewee. So, which of the facts given by them is important to your audience? What clarifies any information you found a bit confusing before? Answer whatever's left of your 5 W's and your H. Look for any additional foci elements. Look for compelling direct quotes. Most of the time, when you include a direct quote from someone. Think about what you hear whenever or see whenever you're watching a movie. You're looking for something kind of like that. You want something moving from this interview. Not every interview is going to give you something like that. If you don't have anything quite at that level, you just keep looking through it and at least try to find something interesting or something they said very well. Everything else, you're paraphrasing information from them. You want to make sure that whenever you paraphrase, that you are still sticking to your facts, to the things that they actually said, and not generalizing so much that it's actually that you're making it sound like they said something completely different. Now, when you're paraphrasing, most of the time you will need to attribute facts or statements to a person or the place where you got it. So in this example, the novel coronavirus vaccination appointments open to Louisiana K-12 educators and support staff on Monday, blah, blah, blah. So this is a fact someone used to start an article. And after this fact, she included the information Governor John Bel Edwards announced Thursday. So that's the attribution of the person and when he announced it, that teachers and support staff at state K-12 schools and daycares would be eligible. Now, as you can see, the author starts with the newest information about COVID-19 vaccinations. She attributes the information to Governor Edwards in the sentence after her lead. It is a tiny bit redundant, but in general, that's the idea. That's what you want to do whenever you're writing your information. Try not to repeat the same information too much, but in general, that's how you would do it. Okay, now on to your interview writing assignment. Now there are two parts for this. I want to make sure everyone has a person to interview. So for your first interview, you are going to contact one of your classmates. This can be someone, if you're in the 9 a.m. class, for example, anyone from the A or B sections. In the 10 a.m. class, anyone from the A or B sections. If you can't find someone and you're in the 9 a.m. class and you've tried everybody, no one is available, then try and contact the 10 a.m. class. If you're still having trouble, reach out to me. I will do my best to help you find someone. But I want everyone to have a person by Wednesday, September 22nd. That way you'll have enough time to perform your interview, whether it's in person or on Zoom, and to post your information and have all of your writing done and ready to go for Sunday. Now, part B is due Sunday, September 26th. You're going to conduct an in-person or a Zoom interview. Now, when I say a Zoom interview, I am not going to take points off if you use Skype. What I mean is you need to have a video interview of some sort, either of you interviewing a person face-to-face or over the internet using a video chat of some sort. Record your interviews, post them on Vimeo or on YouTube, and take notes about the important topics as you're doing the interview. Remember, what you might find out some interesting information that will lead to additional questions besides the ones you created before you started the interview. So when you approach this interview about your classmate, what you're doing is you are writing a feature about them. You want to know all about them. Your audience wants to know about them. They are the most interesting people in the world right now. Tips for asking questions. Now, your book does offer a few suggestions. I also found these two articles to be very interesting and very informative. The journalist Dean Nelson had a great interview on interviewing, and also the journalist resource tips for interviewing are and both excellent places to start as you're writing your questions. Now, the writing portion will be your pre-interview outline. So this will include your questions as well and bullet points from your interview. You don't have to have a lot of them, but at least take note of a few interesting elements that come up as you're doing your interview. You're actively listening while you're writing things down in order to perform a better interview. And after you're finished with everything, include a link to your recording. I will add a version of this online so you can have a visual representation of how this should look. All right. Well, that's everything for now, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.